One team that we will be seeing in the tournament, but more than likely, for the first time in quite a long time, the Kansas Jayhawks are not going to be a top 4 seed. They have really struggled. We talked about them a few weeks ago and kind of a disappointing factor, and they have actually kind of really trended downward. Another tough loss at Houston this past Monday, but I figure we got to kind of dive in a little deeper into this. What is going on in Kansas, Raider Jim? Your thoughts?
Yeah, Kansas. I mean, there it is, one of those historic programs. They're not just used to being a fixture in the top 25. They're very familiar with being ranked number 1. And for long stretches, they're number 1. They started December 2024 as the number 1 team in the AP, had run off 7 straight victories. And since then, since that ranking, they have gone 12-11. That is ridiculous. And for a Kansas team to have 9 conference losses, that is the most losses by a Kansas program in more than 40 years. That is what a jaw dropper when you start digging into the facts. They dropped 6 of their last 8 games. They had a 34-point loss to BYU. How did all this happen? Well, I'll tell you. I said it about Gonzaga last week. I'm going to say it about Kansas this week, and people can just roll their eyes and go, here he goes again, same old song. But we're in that age, and it gets worse and worse as the years and months go by, of instant gratification. There is no discipline. You can talk to kids till you're blue in the face, but they're just going to do what they want to do because they know more than you. Or they just flat out, like Coach Hurley said about some of his UConn kids, we just give up. Forget it. We cashed in already. They're probably already looking at where they're going to play next year, some of them. So what happened with Kansas? AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin. 2 transfers. Griffin came from Alabama. AJ Storr was a hot shot over in Wisconsin, and he came in. And you know what? The other day, the other night they had a game. Those guys put up, I think, 2 points between them. They're barely playing. So you've wasted 2 spots on your roster that you thought you were going to get these guys in there, and they were just going to bring more firepower to your weapons. And it didn't happen, and it's not happening. When you give up 2 spots like that, you better hope that you've got somebody to step in and fill in the blanks. And apparently they don't have it. You can't create the chemistry when you're switching out the parts like that. That's my personal opinion. You just can't. I watched, as I usually do at this time of year, I watched Survive in Advance. I watched that again just the other night while I was sitting around and having a drink. And they said, I like when we were seniors that we knew we were going to see the same guys as when we were freshmen, as when we were second year, as when we were juniors, and then seniors. We knew that they were going to be on the team. None of this, throw them up in the air and see where they land next year. And it's starting to, some programs, it's going to benefit. Other programs, Kansas, even to a point, Gonzaga, it's not going to go as well.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't think it's as simple as just pointing and look, Hunter Dickinson, you look at his numbers, and I mean, he's having a fine season, essentially averaging a double-double, 16.5 points. And I think he's just a tick below 10 rebounds a game, shooting over 50%, never really been a 3-point threat or anything like that. The one big problem I have with Hunter Dickinson is it seems like the defensive side of his game since he was at Michigan, he's either, I don't know if it's diminished because he's gotten slow. I don't know what it is, or he's not working on it as much, but I think he averages like 1.2 blocks a game, which, look, if you're 7 feet, you have to be more active on the in the paint than that, period. And it's a lot of things, but the one thing that really jumped out to me when I watched them against Houston, it wasn't the talent gap. The talent gap wasn't astronomical. Kansas was playing with them. It was fine. The biggest thing for me is late game body language. I don't know what is going on, but there is a disconnect, at least for me, the last few weeks from what I've seen in late game situations. The slumping of the shoulders, a mistake is made and an immediate look at a teammate as if, what, not to shift the blame, but almost like everyone look at this person, like it doesn't look good from the outset. And you talked about the transfers, and I do wonder, look, Bill Self is right now, I would say, with all due respect, to Mr. Hurley up there in Yukon, Bill Self is the top of it. If you take everything and put it together, with all due respect to Patino and Hurley and Calipari, Bill Self has done everything they have without the BS or the noise or whatever. He's just gone about his business. He's done it at Illinois. He's done it at Kansas. I'm just wondering if it's now the time of Nate Oates and the Hurleys of we're going to almost run it like a year-to-year situation where everyone's on a one-year contract. What are you going to do to get that done, while for the success of your program in terms of wins and losses, that's probably what you have to do. But the sustainability, the dynasties, I don't know if those will hold. As you kind of mentioned, where you're not going to have a sophomore, junior, and senior 3 starters or 4 players starting 3 years in a row, to where by the time they get to be seniors, he knows where his 3 guards or 3 forwards going to be. He knows where his 2 guards going to be without even having to look. And there's a situation, I believe, of a disconnect. And I do wonder if the lower schools start to catch up a little bit, because a lot of times when you see Cinderella, look at UCSD. You look at UCSD and you go, wow, what a great season they're having. With all due respect to them, next year, they are probably going to struggle. They are a senior-heavy team. A lot of these Cinderella stories are senior-laden teams that have been there, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. They played together from the beginning, and that's kind of their extra advantage. So you do wonder if they can kind of keep that going. I don't think it's a simple, this is what's wrong with Kansas. This is what's wrong with Kansas. I think everything has just dropped a little bit, and they've kind of come back to the pack a little bit. I mean, some of the stats, 80 weeks of being in the top 25, like I said, 20 plus years of being a top 4 seed. I mean, the stats are incredible. And Bill Self having to put out I'm sorry to the fans, acknowledgement after the Houston game. Like, they're going to the tournament no matter what. They're probably going to be a 5, 6, or 7 seed. And I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe get into the Sweet 16 just because they have that type of talent. But that's the prestige that comes with being at Kansas. And I hate to say it, but I saw it with Villanova and even with Virginia. How long is Bill Self going to look around and go, how much energy do I have to
do it?
Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, on the outset, I mean, recruiting old school sounded laborious. Sorry. And this just sounds like outright hell, trying to put a lineup together, going, well, shoot, if I don't get him 15 minutes, is he going to transfer next year because I'm losing it's incredible. And I think at some point, Bill Self's got to look around and go, you know what? I'm good. There's nothing more for me to do. And I think that time is coming sooner.
Give me a microphone.
Exactly. Hey, we got a spot. I'll move out of the way. But yeah.
I mean, AJ Storr, who knows if AJ Storr is going to want to come back next year? I mean, he's played 15 minutes, I think is the most he's played since December in any game. And that's and he's not scoring. He's not producing. So and you hit it though, because think about it. Look on there. We're not talking the big names, the old school, the blue bloods. You see Grand Canyon on here this year? No, you don't. Why? Because they lost kids. We talk about UCSD, Tritons. Wow, look at what these guys are doing. Well, what happened when Long Beach was the powerhouse of that conference? And Long Beach is like, I think they've got 3 wins or something.
Yeah.
They may not even make it to the tournament because they only take the top 8 teams, I believe. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, it's the new, and I understand it. I personally, selfishly, I wish we could go back to the old school way, but I also do understand that, look, these kids got 4 years to make the most out of their opportunities. I'm a big fan of the free market. If someone's willing to pay you to do something, I mean, I'm not going to stand in your way. So, but yeah, the times, they are changing. And speaking of that, there's another one that I think this actually is a lot more kind of monumental going forward, at least just for the sport of basketball or college basketball. It's tournament expansion. And we just got to you got to put our thoughts on it, because I hate to say it, but I think this offseason we're going to see some changes. But 68 teams as of now, however, 76, 84, whatever. I don't know how they're going to do it, but tournament expansion is more than likely on the way. I'm pretty sure I know Raider Jim's thoughts, and I'm pretty sure Raider Jim knows my thoughts, and you all probably think you know our thoughts, but we got to fill some time. So, Raider Jim, tournament expansion. What are your thoughts?
1939, we had 8 teams that played in the tournament. 12 years later, 1951, they upped it. They doubled it to 16. 1975, they doubled it to 32. 1985, doubled it to 64. 2011, they said, well, it's not fair for everybody to get left out, so let's bring in 4 more teams, and that's where the first 4 groups were added. Now, so what does this mean going forward? I don't want to see it to turn into everybody gets a ribbon. Everybody gets a participation ribbon. What, you lost 15 games? You can still be in the tournament. What, you lost 20 games? Come on, though. There's room for you. I mean, and then what do you do with the calendar? How do you keep it as March Madness, or do you you hire a marketing agency, you come some newfangled cute name and push it into April, and then you start encroaching on the opening of Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. You start crossing those boundaries, you're making a lot of trouble for a lot of different reasons. And again, you're going to dilute it so much, it's just not going to matter anymore. And I hate to see it happen. I don't follow the NBA that much, but I remember, I am the old guy. I remember when it was just like, 4 teams were going to make the playoffs or something like that. Then they went more and more and more. I think everybody but the worst team in the division makes it to the playoffs now. And the upset is fine. I like that there can be an upset, but at the same time, my goodness, that's when the sandbagging, things like that can possibly happen. I'm not saying it does happen, but hey, we know we're going to be in, so you can rest people, you can keep people healthy. You don't have to give the 100% is how I see it. Do I think expansion is possible on the horizon? They're saying maybe if they do it, it'll be in 2026. Well, that is, like you said, that's just next year. But what does that mean? And that they need to give a more clear answer on that. But quite honestly, I don't think they need to do anything. I wish they wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, in my vote, bring it back to 64, as much as, them. And I'm sure Dayton is a lovely city, and they get a nice little bump from the first 4. But, especially the 16 seed games, that's not really something you're keeping an eye on. 64. And then also, not to mention, it's hard enough to put these darn brackets together. Now you're going to turn it into 78 or 70. I mean, how are we drawing these? They got to think about us too. But you also did mention the scheduling part of it. And I think college football kind of ran into it this year, where they got a little too deep into the NFL playoffs, to where we came out of an NFL weekend, it's like, all right, conference championships are coming up. I think that's what it was, or maybe it was after wild card weekend, but I think it was after divisional. And it was kind of like college football, kind of like waving their arms, going, no, we're playing a national title game. And it's like, no, Monday Night Football ended like 4 weeks ago. And, obviously, Raider Jim, you're a big Notre Dame fan if you're an Ohio State fan. But for a lot of maybe not big time fans, they were like, oh, that's right, there's a college football. the later you get into things, if we start having the national championship game mid-April, that's gonna be interesting because now all of a sudden, as you mentioned, you're into baseball season and stuff like that. And even school calendars, stuff like that. It's not
Right.
easy to be a student athlete. And then to have to then deal with, okay, well, I got finals coming up. Oh, wait, no, we're gonna have to go here first, and I gotta do media, which every one of them, they're blessed to have that opportunity, but still, it is something that needs to be kind of thought about. And I think the main thing you talked about dilution, 8 teams or 10 teams or 12 teams, however many they add, what are the chances that in that group that they win 2 games and make it to the Sweet 16? I don't think they're very high. And everyone can maybe be yelling about VCU. They were a play-in and they went to the Final Four. Okay, well, they're an exception rather than the rule. Most of these play-in games, it's cool and we fall in love. Oh, what an 11 seed. And then maybe they win against the 6, but eventually, more than likely, they will bow out either at or before the Sweet 16. We're not losing out on, with all due respect to North Carolina. North Carolina isn't going to be a national championship team if we suddenly open it up to 76 teams and they're allowed in. So that's my biggest issue. I think 64 is the perfect number. Whatever 68 is what it is. I've accepted that they're going to expand it. For me, it's just wondering if they're ever going to stop. Because even on the football side of things, I think 12 teams are too many. I don't think there's 12 teams that can win a national championship. And basketball is very different, but I don't think there are 76 teams that can win a national championship. I don't even think there's 40 teams that would be the at-large bids, because I also do think if you win your conference tournament, you do deserve to go in, and that's non-negotiable for me. So, of those at-large teams, am I going to cry any crocodile tears for the Texas Longhorn fans that are going to be left out? No. Win in November and December. I don't know what to tell you. Don't get mad, get better. But that's just kind of where I feel with it. But again, NCAA basketball, they're going after the money. That's the biggest thing. We're never going to go back down to lower amounts of content when it comes to this stuff. Just way too much money to be left on the table, unfortunately.